very quickly, you want to get to know everybody. So you can introducing yourself, your name, maybe the law firm you're from, and any interesting thing about you. So we starting with you. It's going to go round.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Hello everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Asein. But I retire some teachers. Curiosity about being here. Oh.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ofunne. I'm from Bolela Technique, and I'm here because I'm here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bernice. I'm from Asein.
Hi, good morning everyone. Good morning. My name is Favour Pastor. I'm waiting court bar next month. I'm an NYS trainee at the Nigerian Copyright Commission. I'm here because I'm an IP enthusiast and I'm very passionate about how the various pieces of IP intersect, copyright, trademark, patent, and rest of that. So fashion law is such a landmark aspect of how IP intersects together with contract and business law. I'm talking too much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bernice. I'm from Convergence Law Practice, and I'm here because I'm curious.
Good morning everyone. I'm Amina Salaudin. I'm curious too.
I'm also curious.
Alright, I just stepped in. My name is Shinwara Shago. I got this email like this when I just said, okay, I wanted to do this for a while, but I mean, apart from curiosity, I mean, no knowledge is lost, so get to learn every day, so that's it.
Okay, so if you call it inside. Okay, she was my okay, try to
Good morning, everybody. I'm that Shele. I'm here because no knowledge is a waste.
Thank you. Okay, so we're introducing ourselves because we want to know you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My apologies for coming in. I got to Muzon Center first before coming here. Yes. My name is Matthew Harry Izuke. I am a young lawyer from Stream Soas and Con.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Bernice Asein. I'm the founder of Fashion Law Institute.
Hello everyone, I'm Rejoice. I'm training associate at Fashion Law Institute.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eliojo and I'm a trainee associate at Fashion Law.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Bliss, a film training associate at Fashion.
Okay, so to the curiosity to satisfy it, I'm going to be calling on an associate at Fashion Law Institute, Eliojo. She's going to tell you what we do at Fashion Law Institute and why we seek out partnerships like this. So Eli is going to do that.
Good morning, everyone. I guess everyone already knows my name since I introduced myself. So, fashion law institute. I guess I don't know if some of you have heard about us before. MBA. Yeah. We have it's fine. I'll just give you a brief overview of what we do. So, Fashion Law Institute, we are an interdisciplinary organization, and we sit at the intersection of law, fashion, and education generally. So we don't do strictly law, we just merge everything, go into business, law, and every aspect. And then we host like clinics, IP clinics, where we teach brands how to protect their IP, how to sustain their business, and navigating contracts generally. So we work with brands, we work with organizations, and we work with firms too that are interested in fashion and the legal aspect and other aspects. So that's basically what we do. So going into this, you're going to learn a lot about what we do, how we do it, and how we can help others. So I think that's like what we are doing today, you get a full idea of what we do at fashion.
So to start this event, I'll be introducing our facilitators. So the first person we have is Ms. Bernice Asein. So Ms. Bernice Asein is the founder and executive director of the Fashion Law Institute, Africa's leading institution at the intersection of fashion and law. As lead counsel at Cardinal Counsel, a top-tier Lagos-based fashion law firm, she provides strategic legal support to stakeholders across the fashion ecosystem, from designers and manufacturers to tech startups, investors, and influencers. A specialist in intellectual property law, startup law, contract negotiation, and regulatory compliance, Ms. Asein is widely recognized as a pioneer in fashion law on the continent. She is the author of Fashion Law in Africa, a comprehensive resource on the intersection of fashion and law across the African continent. She has been nominated for the prestigious Future Africa Award Prize for Law in recognition of her impact. She holds a certificate in fashion law from the prestigious Milan Fashion Institute, alongside certifications from LVMH, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and the Intellectual Property Institute of Nigeria. Her academic journey also includes an LLM from Babcock University and advanced studies in leadership and public policy at the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance. May we please welcome Ms. Bernice.
Hello, everybody. I apologize for us starting very late. To be honest, we didn't know that we had a list of people who were going to attend, but for some reason we could not connect or contact you to tell you where the space was, and that's why we're starting by this time. But I'm sure that you would enjoy the session, so to speak. So, I'll go straight to talking about fashion law. The reason we decided to talk about fashion law during the MBA was because, as a young lawyer, right, I don't think that the fashion industry has that support, right? And we do not have this conversation on a very large scale. So I know when I was starting out as a fashion lawyer, there was really no template to look at outside which firm was practicing this. Maybe they were doing that, but it was not necessarily called fashion law as a specialization, right? But I started out, doing this, and there was a need to actually amplify that conversation. And that's one of the reasons why we reached out to the MBA to have this session. Because we have a lot of people, but we do directly with designers and brands in the fashion industry. Because we don't want the law to be about lawyers. Sometimes when we even have conferences, we have to say lawyers don't attend, so that the designers themselves who this solution is for can actually benefit from it. I would like to start from sharing a story of how I got here. So right from junior secondary school or senior secondary school, I actually started sewing, right? I was a fashion designer. I got into law school, as an undergraduate school. I was still a designer, right? But during that period, my parents would always ask me, are you going to leave law to focus on the fashion industry? Graduate so that you can just go and, if it's so you want to do, just go and do it. But I just didn't feel like I wanted to leave law because I was good at it. It wasn't bad. Nobody forced me there. It was a career that I felt like I could actually make money from. I can't spend 6 years and just leave it to do something else. And then I was also in the fashion industry, and it was very labor intensive. As much as I like the creativity, it requires a lot of work to actually push a business. So I remember, attending Lagos Fashion Week, and one of the key conversations was the entire value chain of the fashion industry is wide. And we have oversaturation happening in the design area. So everybody in the fashion industry is either a designer or a tailor, and nothing more. And I saw that I couldn't just be doing what every other person is doing. So what can I do with the current skill set that I have? Right? What can I bring to the team that was different? And then I was just thinking legal services, fashion, but I didn't know that it was fashion law. So I went online and I searched for legal services, fashion law, and I saw a master's program at Ofunne University, fashion law. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. A course like this exists. And then I went through their curriculum and I saw the breakdown of pillars of fashion law. And the very first thing that was there was IP and human rights. Other things didn't really make sense. Just IP was fine because that was the course I know we were offering in undergrad, and I was waiting for IB class in 500 level so that I could finally be a fashion lawyer or something like that. But during IB, it was nice, right? I remember I was even the only one in my class that was offering IB at the time. The first 2 weeks, nobody was going to be in IB class. Every other person was chasing grades, just trying to look for the course that would give them that grade. I remember saying to my friend, please join me. I was just like, I can't be here as a lecturer. So a couple of my friends actually joined, or some people joined the class but did not write the exam. Right, so we took the class and everything else. But in fact, I don't know, because we're few, the lecturer was going to give us A's, but obviously he didn't. But that aside, right, I got into law school. After law school, it was time to practice, and I was working at an Asein law firm. And in the firm, right, they focus on one area of law, insolvency practice. I was just wondering, how is that everything that we do here is just one thing? And they were making money from it. They were profitable. It was the only thing. It was just like, and they were the best, to be honest. Kule Ofunne and Co. He was doing amazing, right? So I told myself that it's possible to focus on the practice area and just do it. So when we started Cardinal Council, we started Cardinal Council, and I saw myself teaching people about the legal aspect of law. So when the designer called, when I tried to tell them that, okay, let's start a session, and 30 minutes is not enough to run through and break down IP for a brand. And if you're not educating them, you're not going to get them as clients. We've been able to get these people as clients because we told them this is what they need, right? So I just told myself, okay, the law firm, and then I had a partner in the Cardinal Council. We couldn't be focused on just teaching in a law firm, so we had to set up the fashion law institute, and that's where it was different, and we're organizing trainings and policy advocacy, things like that. But in practicing, I realized that IP wasn't the only thing about the fashion industry. The next slide. And I think I've moved past the introduction of myself. IP wasn't the only conversation, right? IP wasn't the only thing that was going to keep me. If I finished doing trademark or a brand, what else again to be true, right? In fact, when I talk to lawyers, they're just like, what do you guys want from designers? You want to go and tell government to start making them register their business as CAC? What else want from this particular industry apart from trademark? It was curious because I'm like, no, that's not the only thing, right? Because the stage and state of the fashion industry is very, very important. And if you are looking at the West to determine what legal services would be for us, so for example, if you look at internationally, there's a lot of IP litigation happening. They're just like, oh, our brands are not up to that level, so we can't pay for litigation. But there's a stage that they are now that requires a lot of legal guidance. That requires a lot of advocacy, right? Because a lot of work that we do here is also focused on advocacy. Who is going to actually do that? Because you will see at the end of the slide, I'll talk about the fact that when we look at the definition of law, one of it is law exists for social engineering, and lawyers are supposed to actually do that. So if you look at the fashion industry, they need people to create a particular body because they're not self-organizing. They're just asking themselves, what do we do? What do we do? Can the law? And they do not know, they do not have answers to those questions, right? And that's why, we are excited for this particular session. So I'm talking about fashion law in context, basically, industry foundations. We're not going to go into IP, what is protectable. That conversation, really and truly, I'm sure that has been overboarding. A lot of people already know what that is. And that's why one of the things I don't even identify an IP lawyer, a fashion lawyer, because it is quite different or deeper from that conversation. So we're talking about a lot of things. Next slide. So specialization in law, one of the conversations that you always see from young lawyers is, do I focus on a particular area? What do I do? What if I focus on this area, what about other areas of law? But specialization can be viewed in different areas, right? There's industry specialization and there's subject matter specialization. IP is a subject matter specialization. Because if you're going to start a business today, IP is going to be copied and you have a name already. That alone should be protected. So regardless of the industry that you're going to play, IP is going to come one way or another, right? So that's a subject matter. However, fashion is an industry. Focus on it. It means that several subject matter would apply to that industry. It means that taxation will apply, corporate law, contracts, various things will apply to that particular industry. But if you say, oh, okay, but there's nothing bad in both of them, but it's basically just me telling you that you can focus on a particular industry and still be very knowledgeable about the various subject matter that your business will face. Because we represent brands and they are always discussing us about tax. When I tell them that understand that focusing on a particular industry means that you're going to be spreading yourself across various subject matters. The next slide. What is fashion law? Right? When you look at fashion law, people will easily just say, oh, that's IP, that's protection of intellectual property. However, if you want to define fashion law, you have to look at the entire value chain of the fashion industry. You have to look at the life cycle of a particular product. When you think about the product, when the product is sourced for raw materials, after that you transform that product to a finished product. From there you take that particular product and you distribute it. And even after it gets to the final consumer, you have to think about how that product is going to be disposed. Right? All of those variations and things or stages, right? If there is any law and regulation that would apply, it would be fashion law. So that's why I said that you really need to understand where we are as a continent for you to understand that, okay, fashion law is actually really happening, but we are not exactly seeing it because we've seen that, oh, it has to be IP, protection, and all of those things, right? So the scope of fashion law covers a lot of them, and we'll talk about them. Let's go to that time. So yes, the roots of fashion law, right? Fashion law is all about IP. So every single time that you meet someone, you're like, oh, there's a broad heading as intellectual property law, and there are other industries on that. Actually, there's a broad heading of fashion law, and there are other areas. So IP is one of the pillars of fashion law, and not the pillar of fashion law. One of it, there's human rights, there's environmental regulations, there's beauty and enforcement, there's entertainment, there's art, there's a lot of them that we mentioned. But those areas exist independent of, yes, the product that they are trading, what they are moving is somebody's creation. However, right, when you look at the industry, IP is a very solid pillar, but not the only thing. Now, so when you understand IP, you have to ask yourself, what more can I bring to the industry? Also, fashion law is about business of fashion. People like to think that it's about James dress or something, somebody copied, just about that. It's really not about dressing. There is bags, there's textile, there are shoes, there's perfume, there's lifestyle, there's luxury. I like to say that even the biggest fashion conglomerates in the world, LVMH, deals with so many other things other than fashion. They are buying brands that are selling wine. They are buying real estate properties, right, for legacies. They are buying, if you think about any houseware, they probably have it. If you take a trip to Milan, for example, you see that all of these fashion brands have a lot. You can enter Zara, for example, and you don't see any clothes. What you see is plates, spoons, diffusers, things like that, trophies. That's all they are selling there. So it's a very wide industry where there are different areas, and you're dealing with a brand, and you are not just doing just apparel or sewing alone. It is because we are oversaturated. We just have limited brands that are just wanting to do design, cut and sew, which of course historically that's what was done. Not completely, but that was one of the major areas that we focused on. But that's not the only thing about IT, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like we're not having this conversation enough. For example, when you get clients who probably make immediate buys, and they come to you, tell you, you need to protect this. What are you going to do? It's not dress, it's not anything, it's quite interesting. How do you say, okay, we're going to look for the diagram, we're going to pretend that, or we're going to do the industrial design? How does it do? Those kind of things, right? If they bring a shoe to you, do you know how to break down to say, oh, the sole can be pretended, the other structure can be created by industrial design? Many times when you talk to lawyers, they come and say, oh, what product is design? The automatic thing is, I don't think that it's protected, it's just hand dressed. But you see that there are principles of copyright in industrial design that can actually blend. In fact, a lot of fashion items enjoy both copyright and industrial design together. Many law firms, many lawyers will tell clients, register in copyright, register in industrial design. But not everybody has that right. So how do you even apply? Well, that's a different conversation entirely. But you can apply to various, you can apply to accessories. Accessories is a very big part of our culture because we have precious stones, we have those things. Our brands are sourcing for all of those that are creating that. How do you advise them on the intellectual property that applies to that particular product or the laws that apply to their business? So if you focus on just the business of fashion alone, you'll be leaving out an entire value chain that you did not even service. So the next slide, so I've mentioned that fashion is not the subfield of intellectual properties and independent path. So Afrocentric approach of fashion law, this is like one of the ideas that I came up with when I was studying, because it was like, how do I want to understand? Because if I read internationally, when I read the cases and I read all of those things, I like it, right? But I'm just like, what is happening to the brands? What is affecting our own, brands from the African continent? What issues do they have? For example, a typical brand in Nigeria is suffering from poor government policies. When you look at it, Nigerians are very dependent on second-hand clothing and importation. And then everybody's pushing sustainability. Now, when you're pushing sustainability, what that means is that we are encouraging people to thrift and buy clothes. But at the same time, we're forgetting about our local market. Right? When you are allowing importation, you see that now people are importing at the rate. And now people who are making local at the rate are suffering. Right? So the problem of a local manufacturer would not necessarily be IP who stole it or whatever. It would be unfavorable government policy and anti-competitive, because if they come and they bring their adire, it's 2.5. And adire here that was selling government 55,000, nobody's going to look at that. And Nigerians are not necessarily cultural in nature that will say, oh, this has sentimental value. I can't see myself buying it fake. So it's you looking at the African market and be like, what exactly is the problem? Now, when we go into the next slide, when we go into the scope of fashion law, I will mention something called resource sourcing and extractive law. That's a major area of the fashion industry in Nigeria and in Africa. Why? Because most raw materials actually are sourced from here. In fact, Nigeria and Africa's contribution to the global market is not only our creativity, it's our raw materials. The very fact that our raw materials are the foundation of the global fashion industry. What we do is we export more materials than anything else. So that means that as lawyers, we should be focusing on mining, resource extracting, right? What are the laws and policies governing that particular angle? We have clients where, they are going to find their own precious stones. They are going to actually kill their own animals. How are you, governing? How are you advising on that particular thing? What laws exist for that? But we don't talk about those things, right? But that's a major area of our practice. So who are the key players in the fashion industry? I mentioned before that the fashion ecosystem is, from the product to when it's disposed, right? So who are the key players? Fashion brands, obviously. Manufacturers and suppliers. The manufacturing houses have come up right now, and it's become a very competitive market. I can't even lie. Now, brands and manufacturers now even argue and fight for IP. I don't know if you've seen these things online where you make a designer makes a dress with the manufacturer, and the manufacturer is running ads on the fact that they made that dress for that designer. Right? So it's conflicting as to what they are showing their service is, because again, the designer doesn't even know that the manufacturer should fall under your trade secret. So those are the conversations, and when you see some contracts like that, they don't even think about it. They're just like, oh, this is the minimum order I want, this is the dress should be like that. They don't think about IP assignment. They don't think that when the manufacturer makes it, they actually, obviously put it in a tangible medium and they enjoy copyright. So there has to be an assignment of those things. Most of them don't think about that. I know there's a conflict between fashion designers and manufacturers right now. There are retailers and e-commerce platforms. I'm sure that we talked very much on the fashion tech aspect, but it's really a big area that we are seeing legal services come from. Because now, when you think about data protection, for example, fashion brands, when they sign up on platforms to sell their products, right? One of the things they're thinking about is, do we own our data? Right? Can we export our data? Because some of these platforms don't allow me to export their data after. If I decide to leave and end my transaction, then would I take my clients with me? So platforms do not allow in their terms of service. So how exactly do we balance those things? So those are conversations for e-commerce platforms and like modeling agencies. This is another area that is neglected. We don't talk about them, but they are coming up right now. Right? In the space of 3 months, I know that a lot of people have said, oh, they want to start activities. Because one, you see that last year there was an exposé by Times Magazine talking about how modeling agencies were coming to Africa and we take these models to Europe, right? And then they sign contracts that they don't understand what it is. But once you're not scouted by a top brand, they will bring you back and you're in debt because once they take you there, you're obligated to pay them back with money. So they did an expose showing how that African models were stranded on the continent and they were in debt. And how will they pay when they're in IP camps without jobs or they didn't go to school? Right now, I think tomorrow the Fashion Workers Act is going to be coming into force and signed in the US, talking about regulations for modeling agencies, talent houses, things like that. So obviously that is telling you how much it's important. Many of our models are international models because obviously there is the inclusion and diversity. People want black people on the runway. That conversations also happen. We have a lot of modeling agencies that exist everywhere now. So how do you regulate them? How do you put them in checks? Things like that. Those are things you have to consider. Stylists, creative directors, artisans, very, very important. A lot of times, people, when you see IP issues, you realize that many times the artisans in Ghana, they are paying artisans for. We have people who are artisans and tailors in Nigeria claiming to be fashion designers. Because all they do is replicate. I come to you and you make XYZ dress, and you make it. You're not a designer, you're probably just replicating. You're just an instrument for counterfeiting, so to speak. So most of the time they forget their place. We currently have a particular matter. I think a particular design blew up on Twitter, and the transaction was basically somebody was crocheting beautiful designs, right? Somebody came to me and had to say, oh, I need you to crochet this for me. And then the person will come back and say, oh, I need you to do it. And that same outfit, right? This person kept on ordering that particular, but she was selling it. She didn't disclose that, right? But at the end of the day, there was no information of when the dress blew up online, it was who owns the design. And this girl said, oh, I gave you the brief, or I commissioned the work. And the person says, no, I was the one who told you what stitches would work with this design. And so today we are constantly fighting. Nobody wants to settle. So a lot of times they forget the artisan title. Some of them forget that they are designers. Some of them play the role depending on where the money is coming from. So it's also a very important thing. The next slide. So there are two types of people in the fashion industry. They are the core people, and that's people I mentioned before, and then the auxiliary players, and that's where lawyers, accountants, journalists, development agencies. I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's a lot of development agencies coming into Nigeria or Africa, and they're just doing like 50,000 trainings for women, in fashion, like giving $10,000 to one person. They just give money and they're training them. They come as incubator programs, they come up all of those things. So they exist. There are a lot of them actually. They are auxiliary players just really helping to make the system better. And they are also people that you would end up, if you decide to focus on this area, providing services for. Photographers, videographers, content creators, influencers, they all just help. PR, marketing, they are part of the people who make the system work. The next slide. So fashion law is for everyone, the creative stakeholders, business, professional stakeholders, legal policy and support professionals I mentioned before. Next. The next slide. Next one. Come back there. So, scope and intersection of fashion law. I already mentioned intellectual property law, right? There is fashion and local content, oil and gas. You know the very fact that we have, obviously, oil and gas firms coming here to explore our services. There are laws that actually says that for you to actually run your outfits, you have to get your outfits from local manufacturers. You have to have like 80%, right? And you have garment manufacturers in Nigeria applying for those things. They have to actually apply for certification. When they are certified by the local content board, then they can now apply for those things, right? There are designers who obviously make shoes, and all of those things can be patented because they go through a series of trials. Those shoes cannot really be ordinary, they're not ordinary shoes, right? I think there's a particular brand, Ofunne, they're the only shoe manufacturers in Nigeria that supply oil and gas firms because obviously they have the certification that they've gone through and all of those things. These are important areas because if you're going to be representing garment manufacturers, they want to be licensed, they want to be certified by the board. those things will come into play, right? Those are policies also that, again, Nigeria is leading because I don't think that there's any other, country that has this particular, but it's just because they want to protect and also promote our local content, local designers, local garment manufacturers, and that's why that law actually exists. It is the Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Content Development Act. There is resource sourcing and extractive law. I mentioned before that our contribution to the international market is the very fact that we produce most of the raw material that is used by any brand that you can think about, from leather to cotton to anything, plants, it comes from Africa, right? So that's a major and important consideration when you're dealing with brands. For example, in the EU, they don't want people killing animals anymore. Like, they don't wear animal skin. In Nigeria, we don't care. We want to mine and kill anything. So if you're going to be exporting, because I like to also say that the fashion industry is by implication very international. Somebody can be here, you can see a local manufacturer here, and the next person that's going to speak is also a manufacturer, right? You can see somebody who is manufacturing there and is supplying raw materials or dresses to some brands, and you are expected by the regulations in the EU to show what, be transparent. Where exactly, how much did you pay these people? Where exactly was it sourced from? Did you follow the due process? Those things all come under resource sourcing. And there are certifications that they have to apply for, right? There is it's another area too. People who deal with blood diamonds, for example, diamonds or jewelry, people representing brands, there's a certification, Kimberley process or Kimberley certification. And you have to show that there was no bloodshed basically before this particular thing came to. So when they call it blood diamond is the fact that people are paid like less than $1 to dig and mine diamonds. So if there's any evidence to show that you did those things, so you cannot hold people up to par, you most likely will not be certified. So those are the things that you have to think about when you're dealing with representing jewelry brands. So cultural property and traditional knowledge. I also like to talk about this because it's very important, really, because we focus so much on intellectual property, and intellectual property is very individualistic in nature. One person wants to own the rights to something. However, we are a continent with over 3,000. I think we have like the largest cultural diversity in the world, and you can actually see, right, that everything that a lot of designers even do have historical backing. In fact, you will see now that it's even worse that a lot of designers want to monetize and commercialize historical heritage of a group of people. Do you understand? Like, for example, the Ekerete clothes in the Abia State. A lot of designers would claim that they probably designed that by just doing one or two things and will want to apply for copyright for that particular design. So sometimes you see that a very important conversation in this industry is who owns culture, right? Who really owns culture? What are we doing to keep records of that? What are we collecting in return if it is actually commercialized? So cultural heritage law is very, very important. There's beauty and cosmetics. I mentioned before that a lot of brands don't just focus on apparel. They provide I don't want to call it low service, it's not cheap, but they provide other points of sale for brands. So you can't buy my dress, but you can probably buy our lipstick. Right? So there's beauty and cosmetic regulation that applies to the fashion industry. A lot of brands actually provide products on that regard. There's also data protection. We'll talk about that later, but I just mentioned that obviously when you see how that they manage their data, how exactly do they transfer those data from one place to another. And the fashion industry is very international, like I mentioned. There's a lot of cross-border transfer of data. How exactly are you taking care of that particular channel? Corporate and contract law is obviously a business, the corporate entity, once it's registered, and all of the rules that apply to regular companies will obviously apply to the fashion company. Development law, very important. So we are in a developing country. And you will see that there's a lot of creating and enabling an environment for small businesses to grow, access to finance, skill development. And when we talk about technical technical education. Fashion is part of it, very key area of technical education. So obviously, a lot of policies that goes into it that affects the fashion industry. Immigration law, very important. A lot of models are moved from place to place. So you spend your time trying to apply and see how you can validly move them or legally move them. International trade law, also very, very important. We saw the show off of China and Trump, right? The very fact that a lot of people have their value chain and their supply chain scattered across. Somebody can have a brand in US and they are making the clothes somewhere in Japan. How do you move that? There are laws that govern rules of origin, countries of origin. There are principles of substantial transformation. Why would a particular good that was made in Nigeria be made in Italy? Of course, because they made some level of transformation to that particular product. And all of those rules and policies are codified in a particular treaty or a bilateral agreement. Right? But a lot of times we don't go through all of those, but it's a very important area. Environmental and sustainability regulation. Remember that I said that in the value chain of life cycle of a particular industry, you would think about products when it is disposed of. So the fashion industry is like the second polluting industry in the world. Obviously, you have to think about how exactly is this product going to end after this? Where is it going to end? Are we going to be upcycling? Are we going to be recycling? Are we going to be burning it? Many countries have made burning outfits and textile a crime. In Europe, it's actually a crime to do that. Nigeria was so far from because somebody can just decide that they want to burn down their trust. But you don't do that in saner crimes, right? What do we do? So the rules that would govern all of those things is environmental regulations. And Nigeria, funny enough, has a very recent law on environmental regulations. How that you have to talk about your extended producer responsibility as a brand or as a lawyer representing a brand. You'll be expected to draft out, how exactly do they want to take back that product from the designer and probably recycle it from the person who buys it. These are considerations that you have to think about. Also, real estate, of course, it's an important thing. There's always them, licensing a particular house. They want to buy it out. Or there are small shops that they want to actually resell a lot of brands. So those are considerations that you think about.
The next slide. So let's go back to the other one. The next one here.
So I already listed this before. So in all of these things, right, the key players or stakeholders, that will be potential clients to you. Manufacturers, designers, retailers, distributors, modeling agencies, fashion tech startups, illustrators, influencers, photographers, and government agencies. You do a lot of work, you do a lot of drafting, you do a lot of ideation, you do a lot of thinking about the policies that would, be better for the fashion industry. So I mentioned that the potential of the fashion industry, because you can see that obviously the number of people, when people talk about fashion industry, people will actually look at it as an industry that can actually generate money. However, right, you can see from statistics that we contribute $31 billion to the fashion industry and valued at that. That's how much money that we can get if we focus on it. The next slide. Responsibilities of a fashion lawyer. Legal advice, support, compliance and regulations, content negotiation, and dispute resolution. Now, I'll touch on dispute resolution. One of the things that I'm seeing is that every time that somebody wants to focus on this particular industry, they're like, I don't like litigation, so I'm going to focus on fashion law so that I can escape it. But sorry, right? Because in the fashion industry, there's a lot of disputes to be solved. Every other day, we are thinking about going to court. So it's not a place where you want to come and hide from actual practice, because you will go to court and you will fight. So the next slide, please. Law as a tool of social engineering. Like I mentioned before, right? You're social engineers, and you have to be thinking about ways to make the society work. The fashion industry needs a regulation, they need something, they need a body that represents their interests, because they are of value to the entire economy. If you think about the industries that obviously contribute better and can employ brands do well. We can be in-house counsels. We can be obviously external lawyers to those brands. And I'm seeing that that's happening now. We have top brands like Astor Street employing in-house lawyers now, right? It is coming, so obviously the lawyers will occupy that space. Next slide. Yeah, so to be a fashion lawyer in the African market, you have to have an impact mindset because the stage where we are right now, obviously, it's not one that you can count $50,000 now and you will get it. No. It's one that you have to invest in the foundation of it because the possibility actually exists, right? Possibility also exists for this business. So yeah, that would be the end of the slide. Go to the next one. Next. Yeah, okay, so I wrote a book, right, Fashion Law in Africa, where I documented all of these things that I've said in details, obviously, various aspects of it, touching all of the areas of law that has to do with fashion law. And I think it's actually the first book on it because obviously I saw that with time, all of the clients and projects will change. There was need to actually document and put this out there, just in case somebody needs it to guide them in their path. So yeah, it's going to be available July 26th.